Hello, this is teddygaming Beauty, and welcome back to another very special, important video. Like, more important than some of the other interviews I've done on this channel, because today we're actually talking to an actual movie star. All the other ones don't get offensive, but he was the Shredder in 2014 movie. That's right. It's none other than Toru Masamune. I'm sure I'm definitely mispronounced that name wrong, and I'm definitely sorry. But yeah, now this actor has done, like I said, he was played the 2014 Shredder in the Michael Bay TMNT movie that came out in 2014, but he also played some other characters in the TMNT universe. In the 2012 show, he plays like two samurais. They weren't really that important, but he played them. He has also been in some other shows and movies. Um, but he's mainly known a bit more for his TV shows such as Artificial AI, what else? Never Have I Ever, and a few other shows for like really blown up now. And he is the star, not the main star, but he is one of the many stars that are in the show. And so today we are going to be talking to this incredible actor.
Wow. Well, let's see. Ooh, boy. Okay. How far? I guess. Sure. We'll go back way back into the 10th century now. The my family is both from Japan. Uh, my sister and I were born here, so we grew up here. So as I was saying, both my parents came here. My dad was a scientist, actually came here on a Fulbright scholarship. So he was a mega nerd, but thankfully, and he was a chemist, organic chemistry. So he used to make molecules. That was his thing. I said he passed away 15 years ago. But he came over here with my mom and started out on the West Coast. So then I was born. He was postdocing. He was doing his postdoctoral in Madison, Wisconsin, which is in the Midwest. So this is very near Chicago. And so I was born there, and then we moved to Pittsburgh, and then we moved up to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And spent my childhood there, and then went to after that my dad got a job as a professor at MIT, and then I ended up going there for college. So it's one of these very bizarre turns. I've had kind of an odd life, but I guess that's a good thing. And I studied chemical engineering there, which was great. It's been wonderful. I still have very close friends there, and I was probably more of science family, like my sister is actually a scientist, and aunts and uncles, blah blah blah. And actually my mom met my dad but because he was working in a group of my mother's father, who was a fairly well-known chemist in Japan at the time. And my dad was one of his best students, so he went over into the group and decided he was a little frustrated because Japan, it's very it's a very wonderful, stable environment, but it's very hard to get ahead. It's one of these places that's very more group oriented, and so it's not like here in the States where it's every man for himself, and it's sort of but they give opportunities to people who want to forge ahead. My dad was probably more suited to this type of environment, and he decided to leave Japan, leave my grandfather's group, and take my mom with him. So we grew up here, and I ended up growing up in. So I was probably more the art. Well, I love math and science. I always have. And the I can't really say I had any idea what I wanted to do. Going into college. I kind of did. But I didn't really have any long-term ideas of what I wanted. But I was probably more an artistic kid in certain ways. I was kind of put on an art track, like in seventh grade, blah, blah. But it just became more convenient for me to go to MIT, oddly enough. And I went there, and it was great. And I guess it was sort of the assumption that you go to MIT, you're going to go on become an engineer or whatever. But at that point, I had a girlfriend at the time that actually worked at an agency, and I think sort of gave me the little view of, oh, you mean you can actually act for a living? Like it was sort of a kind of a something I guess I never thought of. It was sort of something you do as maybe a hobby or whatever, and never really thought of it as a profession. But it was a slow, painful process, and certainly a slow, painful process convincing my parents. Um, but I did it, and that's eventually moved to LA and did some theater up in San Francisco, and I've done theater around the country. Which, as I was saying, oh yes, and when I decided I want to go into acting after college, I did go to UK and study in London, Shakespeare in London for summer, and yeah, so I'm kind of a theater guy too. I've worked at the Goodman and Williamstown, a couple of for a couple of really fantastic directors and things like that. So I'm hope to return to the stage one of these days, maybe on the West End there. I don't know, maybe one of these days. But right now I'm enjoying life in Hollywood here, so sort of suits my style right now. Put it that way. So yeah, that's sort of a nutshell. So I guess that kind of brings us to the present. I probably missed out a lot of details in there, but that's sort of an overview of how I got from there to here, I guess.
Okay, so the first question is, how did you get into acting?
Oh, okay. So how did I get into acting? Wow, that's always a hard question. And actually it's funny because I don't know if we really know why we do anything in life. I've decided we sort of think of ways to explain it in interviews later, I suppose. But and actually I was sort of joking with someone that I was saying, what is the best answer? Because I'll be asked that, especially because it's, of my background, sort of studying engineering at MIT, and everybody thinks it's very odd that why did I go into acting, right? So that comes up a lot. And I remember sort of coming up with a really interesting answer the other day, which kind of not a very good one, but kind of tells it, is that, well, because I felt like it. And that's actually the reality of it. When I look through it, it's like, well, because I felt like it. And if I look back, it's sort of like, I think it's important to study what you study. And, to this day, as I was saying, I think it was a great education that I got. And also, whatever is the right path, I think it's important for us to have skills, professional skills, and develop all these things and, figure out where we fit in the world. But at the end of the day, I feel like our life is our own. And I feel like you kind of have to think, what do you feel like doing? And that's what you should do. And there are limitations, I guess, and sometimes it's hard. I love hockey. I don't know if I don't know if you can tell from my places I lived. And I play every weekend on this beer league. So I'm not very good. I've never been good, but I love it. But I could never be a professional hockey player. So there are a couple of things I don't think I could do professionally. But I think it was one of those things that it was in that group of things I really wanted to do, regardless of what made sense or regardless of what would people would think is a good idea. But I thought it's something I could do, and certainly I think I could have been finding a number of other things, but that's something I felt like this is something I'd really kind of like to do. I was also a very mischievous kid growing up too. That's sort of, if you were to ask my mom and she would describe my personality, I think I was a good kid in certain ways, always study hard, blah, blah. But I was very mischievous. I think that's kind of how I entertained myself. And so I couldn't think of anything more mischievous than to go into acting. So, toss my life away and become an actor, join the circus, so to speak. And so, but as far as how, I guess the question is more how as opposed to why. Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, as I was saying, it was always one of those things that I was probably more of an artistic kid. I kind of got a drawing, like I showed talent as an artist, maybe in 7th grade, drawing and things like that. To this day, I kind of doodle. It's funny, I'll doodle and I'll think, oh man, I miss my calling, because they'll turn into some wacky, really cool illustration. I'm going, man, I totally miss my calling, So I don't know, maybe there's time. Maybe there's time. But but I was kind of put on that track. But as I was saying, came from family scientists and engineers, blah blah. And that was just kind of the world. And certainly, let's face it, financially, that makes a lot more sense if you have those skills. I mean, it's not that money is everything or stability is everything, but it's certainly nothing to, it's something we can't ignore. So, so it was all, was studying all the other things, and I did, I do love math and science, and so it's kind of going down that path, and we'd make all these in college. So I kind of in college. So this is, as I was saying, studied chemical engineering, and so all these guys were all, engineers and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But as I ended up hanging out with this really kind of artsy, fun, wacky crowd. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, all my friends were like that in high school, and they continue to be that way. And those are the people I'm drawn to. And so those are my friends there. And, obviously everybody's very smart, and many of them have gone to become doctors and, whatever, corporate leaders and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. And, but that's what we were all, again, we were all this very mischievous, artsy kind of wacky people. And we kind of do all this stuff for fun. And one of my friends actually, he got a video camera. We just shot these crazy movies all the time. And so I guess that's kind of got me in front of the camera, I guess. And I had a little bit of I wasn't like the high school theater nerd. Wasn't with that crowd. I did in fourth grade though, write a play. And I was in it. So I don't remember much about it, but it was a hit, because I do remember that I did it in class, and then they eventually showed it to the rest of the school. That's all I remember. So it was a hit. I think it was a comedy. I can't remember, but I think it was just me going throughout my day and getting frustrated with everything around me. So anyway, so I'd done this stuff, but it's all kind of for fun. And, musically, whatever, whatever, classic, what do you call it? Dilettante? I don't know. So, and that was my thing. And so, we made these films throughout college and whatever, we just purely for fun, really just to entertain ourselves. And then it was interesting. I love studying. I really, to this day, I love math and science, but I couldn't find, I think I was working for an oil company one summer, and I remember seeing great job. And I remember looking, they had a brochure, one of these in-company brochures, and they showed that so-and-so was just promoted to senior vice president, blah, blah. And I looked at it, and I remember not being terribly envious of this guy, getting this really amazing position in an oil company, which I think I was kind of looking at that industry, I suppose, alternate fuels, and that was kind of my interest and things like that. And I thought that's not good. I mean, I should want the highest spots. And I had one friend that I swear she was working at this donut shop, and he got this job as this assistant to an assistant editor or something like that in Hollywood, hops on a plane, goes there. And I remember being insanely jealous of him. I was sort of thinking, now that seems like a cool career, to go into Hollywood and do stuff. So, and I just sort of made a note of these things, sort of thinking, okay, doesn't make sense given my, the being blessed with whatever education that I had. So that didn't make sense. But I did note that the people I was kind of jealous of were the ones that were kind of going off to Hollywood. So and then, as I say, I had a girlfriend who was working at agencies and we would joke about everything. And I used to always say, I would say, like, any great idea starts out as a joke. And I kind of believe that. A lot of times I start joking about things, and I realize those turn out to be the great ideas. I don't know what it is. Maybe we joke about things even though we're serious about them. I don't know. So, and then, long story short, I kind of started easing towards that direction. And I think I was in San Francisco doing some stuff, and then I started doing some theater, and um, yeah, it was kind of a weird path, and then all of a sudden things started happening on its own. And I would get, somehow I found an agent. I can't remember. There's a lot of things that were happening on my own. I was obviously trying, and everything kind of compounded on itself. And obviously my parents aren't too pleased with this progression, actually, you know, but, um, but they were good about it. It just doesn't make sense financially. I mean, it's just not a smart thing to do, really. And financially, certainly speaking, I have no regrets in terms of my life, but I think I'm very suited for my life, my current life. And yeah, so there were all these kind of things that kind of, and then when I was kind of making the transition, as I was saying, I went to London to study. And then I remember actually, and then, yeah, somehow there was always good fortune along the way. I did get this part in a movie. John Schlesinger, who I believe is a British director. He passed away. He got an Oscar way back in the day for, but he's old legendary. As I say, I think he passed away probably about 10 years ago. And he cast me a little part in a movie, very very small. And so that was my first thing. And all these little things would happen. Very small part, but it was a pivotal role. But it was one of those things. I look back and I see the mistakes I was making, because I sort of instinctively would kind of look away from the camera. It's kind of interesting, which I think is a natural. Only in Hollywood is it kind of normal to cheat to camera, but they'll say cheat to camera. I think most people's instinct is they kind of shy away from the camera, right? And so I was doing a little bit. So there are all these different things, and I had that, and then somehow through a friend of the family, there was an article, got featured in an article in Time magazine about, at the time, Asian Americans typically went into almost exclusively into math and engineering and science, because it's practical, I guess, whatever, blah, blah. And so they were talking about how there was a little more diversity in terms of what Asian Americans started doing with their lives, I guess, right? And, in terms of, you don't just have to be a doctor or an engineer or a scientist. You can be a, anthropologist or whatever. And I kind of went the extreme. I said, "Oh, you could be an actor." And so I got featured in that article. But there's all these things sort of said, and sort of this big train that kept on moving, and it was actually helped in terms of my convincing my dad that this is the way to go, because obviously things are happening, and he got that. He understood those things, how business works, and if things are kind of happening naturally for you, it's a good road to go down. And one thing he did tell me, and he was a very impassioned scientist and very well for himself as a result. And he used to always joke, or not joke, but he would tell me that I'm one of these lucky people whose hobby also happens to be my profession. And so I think deep down I was kind of thinking that. And maybe he didn't realize how that advice would impact me. Maybe he didn't realize at the time he would regret giving me that advice. But that's sort of an advice I went on, and it's, I think you have to be willing to take whatever sacrifice you have with it. But I made it work, and I think also too, what I found too is that, that it was the right choice because it suits my personality. Does that make sense? And I think you have to take that into account. It's not just what is, I don't think you can go through your life trying to be someone else. So if it's, I think picking that. So I think all these revelations I had, very friends that were, say really wacky friends that, and I'm saying many of them are like, prominent doctors now and things like that. It's very funny. But the message was always, life is to be enjoyed. That's something that one should seek to do. And so I kind of took that ethos and ran with it, I suppose. So anyway, that's a kind of long-winded answer. As you'll find, I have a lot of long-winded answers. So, that's kind of what led me to it, is sort of like trusting that It comes down to what, why. It's like, yeah, because I felt like it. And I realized, well, maybe you just have to take what you feel like doing and making it work versus, you know, taking something that will work and trying to learn to like it. I don't know. I mean, that's sort of that's the approach I took. It worked out for me. Yeah. So I guess that's how I got into acting. In reality, I look back, I don't know how it happened, but I started thinking that way, and things started happening, and followed my bliss, as they say. So
Have you seen the previous version of the TMNT?
yeah, well, as there have been many, right? And now you're talking about the 1990 movie. Is that what you're talking
Um,
about?
or I was talking and just like and anyone's fella and it came for it.
Oh, and also probably also the animated series too, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. Okay. So that's a really good question. So this is how it all worked out for me on that. Is that yeah, I did a lot of research in answer to your question. There was a lot of research went into it because I think it's I think it's important to make any role your own. I'm pretty clear about that. I don't think your job is ever to imitate or fit in. You have to own it. But that being said, I realize this is it's like a modern myth, really. It's odd, but it kind of is. I mean, there's a very specific canon to the whole thing. Um, but my background, a couple of things that are interesting. First of all, the 1990 film, actually, in one of my acting classes, and she's a friend of mine, Judith, who played April O'Neil in the movie, it's actually a friend of mine. So that was kind of bizarre. I knew her. I know her from an acting class, one of my first acting classes in LA. So it was sort of a funny coincidence. I think she had just shot Ninja Turtles, so she was kind of going through all that. So I was certainly aware of these things. But my background is really more because I was in New England at the time. So my background really goes more to the comic book. So when I think of Ninja Turtles, I do remember, because they were in New Hampshire. I don't know if you know the geography of this area, but it's pretty close to where Cambridge was, Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I lived, where I was going to school. And it's all. And I remember a friend of mine, telling me about this comic book that came out, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right, by Eastman and Laird, and it just sounded like such a wacky idea. So he kind of showed me the comic books, and that was the beginnings of it. So that's my knowledge of it. Is I don't know if you've seen those first 6 episodes, and actually it's funny when I think back to it that actually Shredder, I think, appears in the second one. I think I can't remember what it was. I'd have to look over it again, but it's sort of funny that that whole story, I actually read through that. So that's my knowledge of it, or my initial introduction to it. And I remember the animated series came out. So my passion would be probably more with the comics, which is the original comics, which is kind of interesting. And then the movie was great. So I always enjoyed it. So my research, however, when I started going, because I watched everything. Yeah. So I watched, and, as I said, and I'd seen all these things when they were coming out, but I wasn't necessarily one of these guys, these kids that, had all the Ninja Turtle stuff. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Um, because I think that came more from the animated series. I think a lot of the toys and, all this stuff, I feel like that came more from the animated series. So, but I watched it all. And I really wanted to figure out, and to me, the way I approach any characters, I kind of, like I approach my acting career, is I just jump into it and I kind of I follow the yellow brick road, kind of, and I sort of see where things take me, because I think what's much more interesting is, where I'm being taken. Like, to me, it's like much more interesting if I'm going for a ride, because I think it's much more interesting than anything I could come up with. So I watched all that stuff, but I found myself going back to the comic book, and I kind of got led into sort of the IDW series. That actually I kind of landed on that. That a lot of my influence came from that. But I think because of that, a lot of things it was a little darker, a little more brooding, I guess, maybe, because I think that's kind of there's a lot of back history I think that exists in those comic books, about Arakusaki and blah 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 and the Foot Clan back in Japan and all that kind of stuff. And but and I even went back into the kind of its origins. I guess is originally Daredevil, its connection to Daredevil. It originally was kind of based on that, where you had that's what, when it hits that TCRW, it hits that truck. In their theory, what happens if it also hit this kid that was holding this, terrarium or aquarium or whatever versus turtles? That went down. That it was a TCRW truck that hit Matt Murdock, right? That blinded him, and all that went down in all that goo went down into the sewer, and that was the beginnings of it. And that's because there's because they also talk the Foot Clan and the hands, and then the splinter, and then the stick. So there are a lot of analogies. So I kind of did a lot of my research there. But I have to say, yeah, most of my research ended up less on the movies and the animated series and more on the comic books. So I think that's probably, I believe that was your original question, which I long since forgotten. But I believe that's most of my source material was mainly from comic books, and that was kind of where it came from. And it's kind of nice because when I came on set, that's kind of was their idea, because I was kind of a darker kind of just that type, more of that type of character. So as opposed to being sort of a little more openly comedic, right? And from the animated series and whatnot. So yeah. So that was that. But I guess certainly Shredder's always been dark. Like certainly 1990 movie James Saito. I mean, it's always been that way. I mean, how can you not make Shredder sort of a looming dark character? It's kind of dumb. I mean, I suppose you could do it some other way, but yeah, that was probably where I ended up, and I just ended up there. I didn't choose to do it, but also that's also my beginnings were the comic books, because that was when I first was introduced to the Ninja Turtles, and I kind of thought of them as. Does it make sense? The animated series felt more like, oh, this is an animated series of that comic book.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a movie made of that animated series. Like it's all that was sort of my view of the whole world, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How did you find out about this role?
Oh, how did I find out about the role? This is a crazy question. This is like, and this one thing I will say that Ninja Turtles taught me. Maybe it's a good thing about Hollywood, but certainly about life. Anything can happen in this town, and you come here. A lot of times, people will come into town and say, "Oh, anything can happen," and they get discouraged because nothing happens, and blah blah. And you think, "Yeah, who was I kidding?" That's some story someone told me. But I'm here to tell you and everybody out there who is considering moving to Hollywood, anything really can happen here. It's kind of crazy. So, long story short, is oh man, how did I find out about it? Okay, that's a good one. All right, I was just doing my usual schlepping around, being an actor or whatever, going to auditions and whatever, doing all that. that's stupid actor life. And I remember going it was very funny. My sister and brother-in-law, and there's this place around here called Sedona. It's a beautiful, magical place. It's in the mountains. It's and it's got this thing they always talk about, the vortex. There's a lot of this very new agey stuff that goes there. So it's I don't know if there's some equivalent in the UK, but it's very a lot of crystals and a lot of, it's that kind of world there. But it's gorgeous, and they're saying there's this vortex, these magical forces, and so we went there. We had a great time, and she calls me up and says, and she's a very generous sister. She goes, I just was, talking to Mark, and we're going to go on our, we got a beautiful place out in Sedona for the week. And we talked about, we decide we'd like to invite you along to join us. And I'm being so Hollywood. I'm going, oh man, because it's like right around policies. I'm going, tell you what, I can give you 3 days. And I actually say that to them. And she goes, oh, okay, well, if that's all you can do, that'd be fun, why don't you join us? So anyway, and so I scheduled the I think the last weekend that they were there for 10 days. And then I get put on hold for this Lincoln Continental commercial, right? So I'm thinking, oh man, I don't want to, I might get this gig, this Lincoln Continental car ad. And so I don't know if I can go. And so anyway, so I'm going and I'm trying to make arrangements saying, well, I'm kind of worried that I might end up, doing this Lincoln Continental commercial. So I better move it up to the first weekend, right? So I'm just being very Hollywood, oh man. And they're going, sure, okay, whenever you want to show up, we're here, and then so I get out there, right? And I remember meeting them, and they found this beautiful place that had these panoramic views, blah, blah. And I remember getting there really late at night, and I woke up in the morning because I was really stressed out, just Hollywood stressed out. And I get up in the morning, I see these mountains. I grew up in the mountains too, so it's very close to me. And I remember just eating my bowl of cereal, looking around. And my brother-in-law was laughing. He goes, man, you look so much more relaxed now than you did last night. Because it's like, you're looking around saying, this is where I belong. And it's so true. And then day by day, I started relaxing more, right? So long story short, I get taken off of Vail, or basically, I didn't get the car ad, right? So they said, all right, we're releasing you. They said we're releasing you. So Mary, well, and I'm thinking, I'm already out there in the mountains. I'm thinking, I may as well stay out here all 10 days. I mean, why not, right? I mean, I'm out here. And I really did start feeling myself again. And I think there's this place called these vortexes. They call them vortexes. So it's also a new agey thing. They call them vortexes where all these things happen. I don't know. And they have various ones throughout the park. One of them is Bell Rock. And if you ever look this stuff up, it's gorgeous. If you ever come to the States and you want to travel see some amazing mountains, it's go to Sedona. It's breathtaking. But anyway, so I'm going up, and there's this thing called Bell Rock, really cool rock that kind of has this dome. I said, I'm going to get to the top of that thing. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go to the top of that vortex. And they're apparently all these magical powers up there. So I'm going up, and it's my sister and brother-in-law, they had just got married, by the way. So they couldn't be happier. And they see us, we're going to clock. And the way the Bell Rock works is they have these rock formations where it's, I don't know. I'm not that good with geology, so I don't know exact formation, but they're sort of piled up where there's sort of these, it kind of curls around, and sort of these weird domes on top of domes. So you have to kind of go through this weird thing every time you go up one level. You have to kind of go around this kind of outward curve. So I'm going up, and they get harder and harder. So my sister and brother says, you know what, we're just going to chill out here. And they just chill. He goes, here, why don't we grab your camera? And once, I know you want to go to the top, so why don't you go to the top? So I leave it with them, and I'm going, and finally they start getting really hard. And I thought, there's a little bit of risk, and it's weird. And I'd see people at the top, so it was frustrating. I said, I know you can get to the top. It's just tricky. I guess you had to have a little nerve. And then I thought to myself, man, if I get hurt, I'm just being a jerk, because they'll have to rescue me, right? So I thought, that's really irresponsible. I can't take that risk. But I was kind of bummed, because I see people at the top, and I'm thinking, and this one girl goes zipping past me, blah, blah, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe you hit this point in life where you just lose your nerve. And it made me feel kind of sad a little bit, right? Because I said, maybe I'm at that point where maybe you just lose your nerve in life. I don't know. And I thought it was actually being responsible, because, I can't get hurt. I mean, that's just, if you're traveling with people, it's you have a responsibility not to get hurt. So anyway, but I thought to myself, I thought, what's wrong with me, because here I am in the most beautiful place in the world, right? And I'm not enjoying myself, and I have to. So I said, just because I'm not at the top doesn't mean I can't play. And I started jumping around on all these rocks, and I remember reading this Jack Kerouac book, Dharma Bums. He always talked about this one guy. I can't remember who or the guru was. That was the mountain guy. He always joked about he climbs to the top of mountains. And he starts jumping, dancing all the way down, and he's yelling out to everybody, "This is what it's all about. This is why you climb to the top of a mountain, is so you can jump up, dance on the rocks all the way down." And so I always think about that too. I run in the hills sometimes. And I think about that. It's probably not. It's a little dangerous, but it's fun. It's really fun. And so I'm thinking, all right. So I just sort of was jumping around the rocks just like a little kid. It's funny. I just felt like a little kid again. And I love scrambling on rocks. Ever since I was a little kid. And so all that stuff. I said, you know what? I'm here. I can play. This is a beautiful place. And oddly enough, I found these little pathways as I was playing that brought me all the way up to the top. Like, it's really weird. Like, I say, oh, there's a pathway. And I went up, and while I was playing and jumped around, I found these pathways, and somehow I made it all the way to the top. It's quite remarkable. It's a good lesson there, and I remember looking out on this, and it's just epic. I can't even describe it properly. There's Cathedral Rock is off in the distance, and it's just one of those moments in your life. You just look out, and it's just so whatever. And we went back down, and that night I get this email, and it's from this big casting office in LA that I've never gone in on. Oddly enough, I don't remember ever going in. It's like, it's one of these offices that's virtually impossible to get into, right? It's like, it's hard to break in the movies, as you can imagine. So anyway, and they said they're checking my availability for something. Okay, sure, yeah, I'm available. And then they checked in later, and they're finally calling my agent saying, we'd like to offer him a role. So I didn't even audition for this thing. I didn't even find out about it. I was vaguely aware at the time that they were going to shoot Ninja Turtles, and I remember they were having some issues. I don't know if you recall that, but they're having some issues because production got delayed and things like that. But I was just as I was saying, I thought I couldn't wait to see it, but I had kind of forgotten about it, whatever. I was like, oh, wow, they're still shooting that thing. And then finally they said, they called my agent up. They said, they'd like to offer you a role. Now the role, your character has a name, but we can't tell you what it is right now, because they didn't want to really, the problem is you almost don't, any number of reasons. They either want it to be a secret, and also it probably gives them better bargaining position, because they, they'll say, oh, he'll probably say yes or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, I think this is a good role, whatever. I say, yeah. And, part of me, I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? I'm just hiking in the mountains, that sounds good to me. I'll head back, and yeah, sounds good. I'll work on a Michael Bay movie. That sounds cool. And then it wasn't until later, it wasn't until, it was crazy. So they kind of kept the information from me for a long time. And I had to sort of figure it out. And even they had me go through makeup, where literally people wouldn't tell me what my role was, like, and no one wanted to be the one to say, because that was obviously the order from above. And eventually they did, but it was very bizarre. So, and then, and I ran into the casting person at the premiere, and she goes, oh, I'm Deborah Zane. Goes, oh my God, thank you so much. And she's telling me she'd seen me years ago. So she knew about me, and she'd seen me years ago, actually, at a, it was a commercial casting for just a golf ad, or no, for Fidelity, for an investment company. And I was supposed to play some Asian dad golfing on the weekends. And she said she remembered me, and I did not get a call back on that commercial. So I'm sort of thinking the director, because she has some friends that are movie makers. So she was kind of doing it anonymously. So I didn't even know it was her, but she, she kept a note, because this guy she probably said, okay, this guy's not going to be a very good, Asian dad golfing on the weekends, but man, he make a great supervillain. And all I can imagine is that, I concentrate. When I concentrate, people think I look really mad. So I've heard that, and they'll say, I said, is everything okay? And I goes, oh yeah, no, I'm just trying to, whatever, figure out, you know, what to do after dinner, or whatever, and that's sort of my natural expression, I guess. I don't know. I guess I concentrate hard. So I'm sure when I was doing my golf swing, holding this club, that I probably looked really scary. So I was thinking that's what casting people do. They know, okay, right, this guy is not good for this role, but what are they good for? So, and then held on to for years, and somehow that just turned into an offer, which, a real amazing, well, let's face it, it's a life-changing role. I mean, here we are talking about it. So anyway, so kind of wacky, but anything can happen in Hollywood. You can just be hiking the mountains, and people are talking about you, trying to figure out maybe he would be a great shredder. and a lot of these bigger roles, I think they just offer them. I don't think they really necessarily audition for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the bigger ones, they just say, let's make an offers, and they go from there. So anyway, so that was kind of wacky, but thinking it must have been the Vortex on Bell Rock at in Sedona. I'm guessing there's something to that, because I was definitely in the middle of the vortex at Sedona, whatever that was, so somehow that turned into I also have this theory too, that because it was a very weird role to play, is that I had this theory that Shredder does, like, you don't really play Shredder, like he just sort of goes around picking out actors to like do his bidding. Because you probably noticed no one's ever played Shredder twice, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. They've never Shredder, no one's ever reprised the role. So I'm thinking he just goes around picking someone to do his bidding. And I was the person that he felt like, who's that guy on that mountain in Sedona? That's who I want. So, because it does feel that way. I mean, the whole, I can't describe it in any way. I went for a ride. The whole thing was a one big ride. And, I probably had something to do with it, but I showed up on time. So that was important. but other than that, I don't know if I had a whole lot to do with it. So